Now, do you own a leasehold property, and do you know all that that means? If you're a leaseholder, you are effectively renting the property from the person who owns the land, called the freeholder. You might have bought your home, but you don't own the bricks and the mortar, strictly speaking. The lease will last for a certain number of years. When it starts to run down, you need to pay to extend it. Experts say that once the lease reaches 80 years, the value of your property will drop by 5%, so it's best to extend it before that point. Well, the cost of extending your lease will be based on the value of your property and how much ground rent you pay each year to the freeholder. Well, the more ground rent you pay, the more expensive it will be to extend the lease. Well, Louis Burns is from Leasehold Solutions, and they're a company that you can pay to help you extend your lease. Louis Burns, ground rents used to be quite small, didn't they? About £50. Is that something that's becoming a more expensive element to home ownership?
I think it's becoming more expensive because certain freeholders have realised the future value of adjusting ground rents to suit them. So more and more, certainly over the last 10 years, we've seen ground rents start to rise dramatically from what they used to be, and also to be linked to financial indices like the RPI, Retail Price Index, etc.
Right, now, and you have the legal right as a leaseholder to extend your lease for 90 years, I'm sure, but you're worried people don't know what their rights are.
Well, yeah, the legal right is to extend. If you've lived in your flat for 2 or more years, and you don't, if you've owned your flat, you don't have to have lived in it. You have a legal right to extend your lease by an additional 90 years. That's adding 90 years onto whatever your lease is, but tellingly reducing your ground rent to 0 for the remainder of that term. If you're a freeholder faced with that, although you get a cash payment, which is the fair market price at that point for a lease extension, pretty much that wipes out the future value you could get. And so what a lot of freeholders will do is offer what's called a non-statutory or informal lease extension to flat owners, and then they kind of trade on the fact that the flat owner will not understand the details of this.
Right, well that could be very much the sort of experience that Leslie McNay had, because she learnt a lot about how expensive this can be when she looked into extending her lease.
We bought the property in 2005. At the time, we didn't even really consider the lease. It had 81 years remaining.
Which seemed like a lifetime.
It seemed forever. Nobody, no family members said anything. The solicitor didn't say anything, so we bought it.
And what made you think we ought to extend the lease?
Well, it's below 80 now, and then I realised how much money. I sort of did the calculations and sort of put it to the back of my mind because I thought we haven't got the money. And then last year I kind of thought now it's going to drop below, it's near to dropping below 70.
So when you asked your freeholder how much it would cost, what did they tell you?
They gave us 2 options. One was for 17,000, and this offered us 90 years lease to become 160 years, and the rent would fall to a peppercorn.
Right.
The second option was a new lease of 99 years with a new ground rent of £350 per annum, but with the rent rising each year by the same amount, so that in 20 years it would have doubled.
But you'd be paying less at that particular moment.
The premium that was offered was £8,500.
So half of what you were being... Were you tempted by that?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. £350, you just think, oh, that's just £350 extra each year. That's affordable. I was also tempted by the fact that it said you wouldn't have to pay any legal expenses, that they would cover all of those.
What did you discover when you took advice?
The lady who did the leasehold valuation, she found out what each of the other properties had done, and one of the owners didn't have the money at the time and obviously just panicked, didn't seek any advice, and she took the second deal and the cheaper option. And
what do you think this will mean for your neighbour? What are the implications for your neighbour?
Well, I was told that it would be very difficult for her to actually sell it in the future. Any future buyer would be advised that it's not a good property to go for because of the rising ground rent.
Will the lady's decision have any impact on the rest of the flat owners in the building?
It will now. The price for her to buy the freehold, her part, was such a lot of money. It was like, I think, about 8,000. If she can't find her share for the freehold, we would have to pay for her part, and then she wouldn't be one of the freeholders.
Well, Louis Burns, you've seen the offer that the freeholder originally made to Leslie McNay. Just how bad a deal was it?
Well, it's a dreadful deal, and so much so that if you fast forwarded 20 years, they would have trouble selling that flat to anyone, because the future implications of the ground rent are catastrophic, really. Because the details are that in the deal that was offered, but the word that they use is they try and make it very difficult to understand the detail. And we call them Trojan horse offers, that they look like a gift, but the detail inside can be quite harmful. And so much so in this case, because the ground rent was £350 a year, doubling every 5 years.
So where would that put it, perhaps in the future?
Well, it wasn't bad enough that it was doubled every 5 years. It was also linked to RPI, the retail price index, or 14.81% every 5 years. So if you fast forward 20 years, the ground rent would be massive. I mean, a huge amount, maybe £5,000 a year. So for the next 20 years, that flat would have paid, in addition to the freeholder, about £30,000 in ground rent additional. And then someone has to extend the lease again, because they've only extended the lease back up to 99 years. It's not an additional 90, which is your statutory right. So for someone to extend the lease again, then you'd be looking at between £35,000 to £40,000, meaning that deal is the freeholder getting close to £70,000 over the next 17 years.
OK, that's scary. I mean, obviously you've got a reason to discourage people from extending their lease informally in agreement with the freeholder, because your business profits from helping them to do it through the statutory route, doesn't it?
Well, it does in a way. I mean, we have a unique business model that we only work for groups of flat owners, but this is an individual flat owner, so we didn't work for Leslie's case. But we do feel very passionate, and we do an awful lot of free seminars, virtually 2 or 3 a week, where we try and educate people. And we start our seminars by saying you don't have to use us, but we're very passionate that people understand what they're buying here, because it's this system of we see so many flats that are unsaleable now and people's lives ruined because people don't understand the future implications of informal lease extensions.
It'll make people think. Louis Burns, thank you very much for joining us.